Buenos días a todos, and thank you so much for having me here. Bueno, ¿cómo funciona esto? ¿Cómo next? I'm a tech investor, but I'm horrible with these things, so apologies in advance. So, hi, my name is NADHILA, and it's my first time at vVenture. And I mean, it's very exciting to be here, the last couple of days, because at K-Fund, we do have a portfolio company based in Bilbao, so I do come to Bilbao every now and then, but I've never really seen the whole ecosystem come together like this, so it's very refreshing. And on the agenda, first of all, quick note, I know that the title was in Spanish, but I'm speaking in English. It's because I'm Indonesian, y me mudé a Madrid hace un año y medio y estoy aprendiendo, but my colleagues at K-Fund is telling me, Nadi, you have to do it in Spanish, but I told them, look, like my Spanish level is restaurant level, just good enough to order some food and some specialized knowledge so that I can talk to Hacienda, and so I don't feel very confident in talking about such a huge topic like this one, about investment strategies and AI in Spanish, so I hope I don't lose your interest, and I hope that I could still convey my message the best way possible. Okay. So I've been in the venture capital industry for about 4 years now, but I've been in the tech industry, I think almost about a decade. And I first started my experiences in the tech industry from tech M&A at an investment bank in London, and then I moved over to Germany, where I worked for 2 unicorn companies, or 2 scale-ups, called Auto1, which is equivalent to the coches.com here in Spain, so they're like a second-hand car marketplace. And then I moved to Zalando, which is a huge fashion e-commerce, also doing M&A, before being a full-time investor, where I had my first VC experience with a German-Austrian fund called Speed Invest, where we were investing in early stage. And to be honest, out of these couple of years in the tech industry, one thing that I always laugh about is that I almost never go a day without anyone bringing up the word AI. It's like AI this, AI that, AI everywhere. And especially, I've seen an uptick in this conversation in the market the last year and a half, 2 years, and especially working for a fund like K-Fund, we a little bit about us, we invest from pre-seed all the way to early growth. Series A, B, we have an office in Madrid, also in Galicia, and we also have a presence in LATAM. And through this, I feel like we are at like a perfect vantage point to see this AI boom, because we can see companies sprouting from different stages, all the way from pre-seed, all to seed, and how it has manifested in different markets, not only here in Europe. We have some recent investments in the US as well. And so, we're seeing companies all the way from, really the experimental AI, they're trying to build the building blocks of this, all the way to companies that are really focusing on the, end user applications of AI. And to be honest, when I was approached to do this talk, I was a bit confused as to where to begin, because I don't know how many of you feel about when you bring up the topic of AI, it's so huge that it's sometimes overwhelming. And to be honest, the next couple of minutes is not going to be me giving direct investment advice, but it's going to be more about sharing some reflections, some conversations that I've had like with other VCs in the industry. And yeah, and I hope that you'll be able to take some things that you might resonate with and might help you put into perspective on how to approach some investments in AI from this. And so many conversations, why is AI booming now, right? Like, why is it all suddenly one huge topic in the last couple of years? But just to put it into perspective, AI isn't a new thing. So AI has been kind of around since the 1950s. So here is a picture of John McCarthy, which is known as the father of artificial intelligence. And you also have people like Alan Turing, like on the left, that already showed the first signs of cognitive intelligence in computers, with the Turing test, for instance. But this technology has always kind of been in the background, but it's never really delivered to the market. And so I think if we really think about why now and why is the timing the past couple of years, I think you can boil it down to 3 really crucial aspects at the moment. And the first one is obviously computational power. So the development of graphical processing units, by the tech giant NVIDIA, has really driven this AI boom. For instance, this is a picture of CEO of NVIDIA launching their new Blackwell platform. So it's a new infrastructure that they've invented specifically for the processing of AI. So back then, this kind of hardware was not even available to process all of this. And with this new hardware availability, combined with data, and I think data has been such a huge topic in the last couple of years. Like for instance, by the end of 2025, it's actually predicted that everyone that is connected, and what I mean connected is connected to any form of digital platform, will be connected about 4,900 times in a day, like every 18 seconds. And by the end of 2025, we will be having about 90 zettabytes of data, and that's almost an exponential growth in the last 15 years. And data is the fuel for AI. And with this availability, I mean, it's ripe to really train these advanced algorithms that have been developed in the last couple of years. And specifically then putting into a venture capitalist lens into this, I'm on Twitter a lot, and a lot of the conversations that happen then is like, look, the valuations in AI are astronomical, and I'm not just speaking about valuations in the US, but this is global. Like with startups in Southeast Asia, I do keep an eye on Southeast Asia a little bit because of my Indonesian roots, and also here in Europe. And sometimes when I look at new startups raising, it gives me a little bit of a headache looking at the investment multiples. But recently, a perfect example is Ilya Sutskever. He's a co-founder of OpenAI, recently left to start his own safe AI company, and he raised $1 billion on a pre-seed round. So it was just a business idea, there was nothing else, and he raised $1 billion. And I mean, as an investor, when you're faced with a market like this, you're kind of faced with the question, are we reaching peak AI, right? Like, are we in a bubble? And this is a huge conversation amongst a lot of us. And what I like to do, it's like as a VC, you tend to see that the tech industry kind of moves in different waves. And there's a quote by one of my favorite American authors who says, history doesn't really repeat itself, but it rhymes. And what I'm trying to say with this is that I feel like bubbles, they come in different shapes. And I like to take some reflections, for instance, from the internet, from the dot-com bubble. So the moment when the internet was, first invented, and there was a lot of speculation in the market about where the market is really going. And then so back in, the 2000s, you can really remember there was a huge uptick, in these valuations, and you're also seeing this really high valuations in companies. And sometimes when we look back and into the context of that time, we might all think that these valuations are also irrational. But from a lot of this, let's say, excess, there are still companies such as Google, PayPal, Amazon, and whatnot that are born from these areas of excess. And what I'm trying to say is that, when you see where these companies have taken, our world today and our society today, I'd like to ask the question, like, is this hype, or is this kind of excitement around the technology, is it too much? Like, is it excessive? I'm inclined to say not really, and I feel like this is what we're also seeing with the AI bubble. And I mean, look, like, there is obviously speculation in the market, valuations are so high, but I think when we start getting a better understanding of where this technology can really take us, the market will readjust, and I think there will be companies that endure, right, from this time. And as an investor, when you look at a company that could look overwhelming like this, then I feel like every investment needs to boil down to certain fundamentals. And I always like to think, focus on companies that bring true consumer value, and in the long run, that will always bring returns. And some of you might think, okay, like, thank you for saying the obvious, but what is it around AI that excites us about the most? And when I was preparing this talk, I did a lot of reading. I talked to a lot of my VC colleagues, and I actually stole this graph from a German VC called Point Nine, and I think it really pictures, it really depicts where we are with the three ways of AI companies right now. Because, I mean, a couple years ago, we would see like these super research-driven AI companies such as DeepMind, but they've never really commercialized because they've been acqui-hired by the tech giants before they even generated revenues. And then you see a wave of companies that are focusing on infrastructure, but also they've maybe commercialized very early, but then they've also been acquired by the likes of Facebook because with AI, they only generated early revenues, and then they already got acquired. But what I'm trying to say here is that I feel like we're starting now to reach the third wave of AI companies that are really focused on the end user applications or applied AI. And then so we're starting to see pockets of companies sprout that are winners in more verticalized solutions that are focused in like companies of the internet, really focusing on the pain points of your consumers in their own sectors and trying to build that strength or that muscle in their own areas of expertise. So I wanted to take an example of a recent investment that we did. It's called My Laboratories. It's the company that I said was based in Bilbao. So I was at their co-working space yesterday. And what they're doing is that they're combining AI really with genomic research. Because right now in biology, there's a lot of ineffectiveness in terms of the software that they're using, a lot of dependencies between one team and another. And what they've developed is like a very seamless program. Like, so under the hood, they're using AI for immune repertoire research to be cheaper, to be faster and more accurate. And this was not possible before because the data was unavailable, the hardware was not good enough, and this was only enabled is enabled now. And our thesis behind investing in verticalized solutions like this is really because they could potentially be very strong in their own verticals, and then if they really do tackle a pain point, these companies will thrive in the end. For instance, this company, they were the software used to develop the COVID vaccines, and so it really did make a huge positive impact, not only within the pharmaceutical company itself, but for the general public, and that for us is very, very exciting. And the case for Europe, and Spain, I think you can also start seeing like this set of companies that are sprouting in their own verticals. For instance, here in Spain, you have companies like Abacum and Eindhoven that's based in Madrid that are already starting to become leaders in their own sectors, right? And when I talk to some startups or people in the ecosystem, they're saying, look, like why don't we invest in the next foundational model or in the next ML infrastructure and build something here in Europe and in Spain? But my feeling is that there's already so much potential that could be reaped from the end user applications that there's really no need to compete in areas that the big players in the US are already thriving at, and plus building foundational models or trying to build stronger algorithms, you'll have to compete with cost, which is very expensive, or the data availability is already out there anyway that these models are just gonna improve themselves at such a rapid speed that competition is going to be too tough. But when you find opportunities in your own sectors, we think that there's a lot to play with, like here. And of course, when you look at today, right, we cannot not talk about conversational AI and generative AI, especially ChatGPT. I mean, I use ChatGPT every day, but I don't know about everybody else. But one thing in particular that I wanted to talk about that I find particularly interesting is that conversational and generative AI, not only does it, help us on our day-to-day, write our essays, write our investment memos, but it's really the point and touch to the multimodal interface that it can bring, like to the way that we interact with technology today. So an example is, back in 2007, if you ask everybody else, like everybody in the corporate world, like what were the phones that everybody was using? Like they were the BlackBerries. Everybody loved the keyboards, but 10 years later, we don't really see phones with buttons anymore. And what I'm saying is that the quality and user experience threshold that these touchscreens bring to the market, like you are able to do so much more with touchscreens, you can browse media better, your screens are bigger, and it just creates a lot of like lower friction and also a better user experience, and that's why people adopted it. And this is what I feel like conversational and generative AI is able to bring to the market. It's like it's a new way for us to interact with technology in a more natural and intuitive language. So maybe in the future, we're no longer like using our cursor to point through a website, click, scroll down, but we're really thinking about new ways that we interact with these things. And I think that's interesting. You know, I mean, we haven't seen much companies in the market, but I think that was one thing that it's a food for thought, something to think about. And obviously, when you talk about exits, right, it's a very important topic to talk about as a VC. And just to keep it very short, like the way we see it is that I think it's going to be a market of consolidation. You see a lot of companies that could be squeezed out because of the cost inefficiencies, and you know, you have these large hyperscalers like OpenAI, Google DeepMind, and they will acquire these small firms. But I think the key here is to just stay agile. Like if you're a founder, if you're a company building something in this space, and if you're an investor, I think investing early in these players before consolidation really begins could bring significant returns like in the next couple of years. And the reason why I whipped through this one is because, you know, I wanted to talk a little bit about the future, because, you know, when you're looking at the space, you can't just think about the next year, 2 years, but maybe you're thinking about what the future would look like in the next 10, 20 years. And I don't know if you've heard of AGI or artificial general intelligence, but it's the notion that these AI companies are going to reach the same cognitive level as us as humans. And here on the screen is one of my first books on AI that I bought maybe 10 years ago. It's by Nick Bostrom, which is an Oxford researcher, and it's a book that really piqued my interest in AI. So they explore the different pathways that AI could exceed the intelligence of humans, and he explores the different risks and the different ways that we can mitigate this risk. And I would recommend, if this is something of interest to you, I would really recommend picking this up. And one thing that's really scary from reading books like this and talking to AI experts is that, what does the future look like? And a lot of them are thinking that, you know, AI could be so smart that humans are going to be pets to these robots. There are people that think we're going to look, you know, like bionic. We're going to merge with these AIs, and the possibilities are so open. But I think that it's really thrilling and it's really terrifying. And for instance, I asked ChatGPT to generate an image that depicts the future of possibilities, and this is what it looks like. And I don't really like what I'm seeing. But to be honest, you know, when I talk to some people say, I think that we need to slow down the development of AI. But I like to put a techno-optimist lens here, and I steal this phrase from one of the partners at K-Fund. So being a techno-optimist means that you really need to be aware that the bears are coming for us in this world. I mean, amongst the climate emergency, all the inequalities, a lot of the problems that we're facing in the world today, I feel like we cannot afford to stop the development of technology just because we are afraid of the future, right? And I think as investors, it's really not about betting on really short-term wins, but it's also betting on shaping the future. I feel like we're in such an interesting seat to really think about not what we want now, but what we want the next 10 and the next 20 years. And there's a quote by Vitalik Buterin. He's like also a tech investor. He's an author, that the future can be vastly brighter than the present thanks to transformative technology such as AI, but it takes human action. And what does that mean, right, from a lens of an investor? It's like, okay, my job is to also think about a lot of returns, like in the near future, but also it's to think about what companies can I invest in that will enable like a betterment in society, right? And I feel like we cannot stop saying like, okay, we should be a little bit more wary about the implications of AI just because we're afraid of it. Because let's say we stop the development of the internet. I don't think that we would be where we are today, right? It's like, yes, some technology such as AI can cause problems, but I think it can also provide a lot of solutions. And I think it requires a lot of intention from working together, so from as VCs, as founders, as governments and researchers to come together and really think about what we want to shape and what we want to build. And I think it's a really exciting time to be in this ecosystem right now because there's still so much to do. Yes, maybe the bubble is a little bit overwhelming to see, but I think if you put a really optimistic lens to it, it could be a very interesting position for us to be in and to shape the future. So I mean, look, then to really put it into perspective, to go back to the title of the talk, yes, I think AI will be the gold standard of technology. It's kind of the same way the internet has become a really core technology in our day-to-day lives today. But in terms of investing, where to see in the future, again, it's to come down back to the basics, to really think about what really drives consumer value, and also to think about not just short-term returns, but in the long run, what do we want to make our world look like in the next couple of years? And I like to go about my day-to-day life when I look at investments with these few basics. And with that, I would like to conclude my talk. And I don't know how much time I have left, but then if you ever want to pick me, I'll be outside for a couple more hours. And then if you have any questions or you would like to learn more about what we do at K-Fund, please feel free to say hello. I don't bite. So I hope that I'll see you around in the next couple hours. Thank you so much.